podcast about the intersection between humans and technology. My name's Guthrie. I'm here with Susan. Hello, Susan.
Hi, Guthrie.
And you want to introduce our wonderful guest today?
Yeah, we have a guest. We have Cheenu Chari. He is a UX researcher, and he works at BMC Software. And we met Cheenu in Austin when we gave we went down to Austin not too long ago and did a behavioral design workshop. And Cheenu, you were in the workshop, and we even had someone, I don't know who took the photo, took a great photo of the three of us. I like that photo. And we talked there. We had got talking, I think, at a break or something about conversational AI and chatbots, and that was when I think we came up with the idea that we should have you on as a guest. So say hello.
Hey, everyone. It's an honor to be here today, and I'm really excited to discuss a little bit more about what I've been doing so far in the conversational AI space and why UX matters a lot when it comes to designing AI-based products.
Yeah, I think this will be an interesting conversation. Now, I do want to mention, you're involved with the UXPA group in Austin, right?
That is correct. I'm actually the vice president of the Austin UXPA chapter. And we've been pretty active for the past couple of years. And the first Tuesday of every month, we always have a meetup. And then the first Wednesday, bi-monthly, we actually have our Austin UX Book Club, which I used to host before passing it over when I was promoted to VP. And we're also in the process of planning some workshops for the coming months. So it's really exciting time in the Austin UX scene.
Yeah, so if any of you are listening or in Austin, you should check that out. And I think a lot of people listening know, but just in case they don't, UXPA stands for User Experience Professionals Association, which is an international group and has chapters all over. All right, so I guess let's see. How do we want to start this conversation about conversations? So
let's start by what is in what are we talking about here? When we talk about like AI chatbots, because that's like
if we use the term conversational AI.
Yeah, it's a very that's like sort of a buzzword.
It sounds pretty specific. So, Cheenu, how would you describe if you're at a party?
Yeah.
And someone says, "What do you do?" And you say, "Oh yeah, I do UX research on conversational AI." And they look at you blankly and say, "What's that?" What would you say?
Yeah, that absolutely. So when specifically talking about conversational AI, I usually kind of phrase it as, think about having a conversation with not a human, but some sort of automated entity. Maybe a robot. It could be an intelligent assistant. And basically, the whole purpose of it being conversational is that it's a back and forth exchange of information to reach an outcome of what the user wants to accomplish in a task, whether it be ordering food like pizza. It can be something about checking a bank account, or getting information about like when the movie times are, setting up appointments, etc. It's really about that, asking something for information, asking them, making the request, and just following a turn-based, step-by-step process exchange between you and the intelligent assistant on the other end.
And before we started our podcast episode today, I unplugged my Alexa because I figured at some point I'd say, yeah, like when I'm talking to Alexa, and then Alexa would start talking to me, and we'd have that on the recording. So I just want you to know I unplugged it. So what do you think? All right, what's like one of the most interesting or weird UX research studies you did in this space?
Well, I don't know about weird, but I can definitely say interesting.
Okay.
So what I like, a lot of my work in the conversational AI space, especially from a UX research perspective, is fairly recent in enterprise. So one of the projects that we were exploring was we were trying to explore how whether personality makes a difference or not in the experience. And so basically, we were actually testing out like either based off of dialogue, um, one that was just kind of plain, "How may I help you?" versus another one that actually explained a little bit more about how they can help you, along with kind of some feelings, that showing a very proactive willingness to help. And what I found when moderating the sessions with these studies is that users tend to prefer the chatbot that actually displays a little more personality, and especially in the context of customer service, um, because it felt that the bot actually is trying and it's actually caring about the customer. And they really liked that feeling that I got, as opposed to just being cold and robotic and just stating "How may I help you?" without any sort of context as to how the bot can help you and how it may work.
So I have a quick question.
Hmm.
So like when we're talking about chatbots, I mean, when I go and fill up my car with gas,
Hmm.
there's a little thing. It's like insert card. Would you like a receipt? Would you like
You
a
mean
car
like there's
wash?
are you talking about a voice or just
No,
messages on the screen?
no, messages on the screen.
Okay.
Would you consider that a chatbot? Is that in the future, as people become used to sort of chat assistants, would you expect that to be, it does that qualify as a chatbot, or are those, or is that something simpler? Is that like a step-by-step instruction of some sort?
Yeah, that is a great question, actually, because it, you know, there are, so I wouldn't say it's necessarily a chatbot because when it comes to chatbots, they can they tend to actually have a lot more uh, more apparent free flow, as opposed to a menu based system. Now, something to really keep in mind, though, is that actually a better way to really think about it is that there are actually different ways that a chatbot can be designed. There can be what you just mentioned with the gas station, where it is more rule based, where you have a predetermined options to select to progress through it. But and then, of course, there's the more natural language process based type of chatbot, which tends to be your typical instant messenger experience of typing a message and getting a response. What I would say, though, when it comes to the gas station example, is that I wouldn't necessarily say that it's conversational because in the sense that the dialogue doesn't feel like it's really tailored. It's really speaking to you. It's just stating, like, even in question format, it's just stating like kind of the basic things of enter your zip code, or would you like your receipt, or something like that, in just that procedural format. But I feel like the real key difference between that and even a more rule based chatbot experience is that I feel like there's less emphasis on how you design on the dialogue design, and it just feels like kind of that generic back and forth, step by step.
We I think it was last week, wasn't it, Guthrie, that we talked to Michael Metz and Andy Wellfleet about their book, Writing is Designing. Cheenu,
Yeah.
do you know that book?
I just learned about it just now.
Yeah, it just came out. I mean, I don't even know if it's officially out yet. So that's an interesting book that it's not necessarily about conversational AI or chatbots, but I think it definitely applies because they were talking in there, and you mentioned about personality. So this reminded me of that because they were talking in there about tone, and they did some great examples of having a conversation, with an informative tone versus I don't remember the names of it. I should have it in front of me, but just about the different tone you can use, which to me sounded somewhat of what you meant by personality in terms of, how helpful are you being, how much extra information are you giving, and that kind of thing. And I really like the way they kind of got people, at least me, thinking about some of these questions and issues. I think we sometimes forget, if you're not used to writing for this kind of conversation, then you may not realize kind of all the nuances that are involved in doing it. It's not just it's not just the words and the order you put them in and, making sure you explain things clearly, but there's all these other things like, personality or tone. And it gets complicated. I mean, I think it gets complicated. And you do this, you work also, at a enterprise level. So I'm always curious about how mature have we gotten about, guidelines and style guides, because you probably have like multiple people. If you're in an organization that's creating these, you probably have multiple people working on it, and you don't want, sometimes, depending on which conversation it is, it has this personality, but sometimes it has a different personality, and that's just because two different people were writing.
Yeah. No, that's a really important point. And I feel like right now, there are a couple of things that we're kind of learning the hard way right now, especially in the enterprise space. And that is that it's really important if you're trying to, it's really important to make sure that, one, you have the purpose of the chatbot narrowed down to something to as much specificity as possible. And then the other thing is, like, it's also really, and this is something that we are still exploring in, is the importance of being able to think about really thinking about the flow of the exchange between the user and the chatbot when it comes to what they're trying to get out of the chatbot. Because what tends to happen, I feel like one of the biggest things that that a lot of people would end up jumping onto chatbot as a solution to solve a lot of the IT problems. But and we always have, and a lot of end users have this expectation that AI is magical, that it knows everything from the get-go. And even the developers, when they actually create when they start creating the AI products, there's this assumption that all you have to do is train once, put in the training data once, and just let it go, and it will do everything. But that's not the case at all. In fact, if anything, it's a very iterative process when it comes to building a product, both from a developer side as well as from a design side. From the developer side, you have to really be able to really keep track of how the chatbot is learning the information, how it's actually able to capture what are called intents, like how well the intents are basically what the chatbot interprets as what the user is trying to do. Like, for instance, if the user is trying to request a password reset, then the chatbot would interpret, could actually have an intent called password reset, or if they're asking about, or let's say, let me give you an example about weather. If the user is asking about the weather in Austin, then the chatbot would take this information and would put it down into a gist intent called check weather. And basically, what's really important is that the developers are able to really pay attention to how the chatbot is matching the intents with what the user is saying, otherwise known as utterances. and then from the and really being able to work. And I think this is something that's really, really important, and something that I wish we are at the stage at right now, but not yet, not quite yet, is better relationships between the designers and developers, where we're working closely, where the designers, or specifically the content strategists, are really thinking about the dialogue, and really thinking about really paying attention to what and testing out what users actually would type in, and then being able to communicate that with the developers so that they can be able to work smarter in design and think about, what things to code for the intents, as well as the data stores with the entities, or how they get all the information, like specific weather and whatnot. And yes,
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so it's really, I feel like in order for conversational AI to really reach its true potential, there really needs to be a synergy between designers and developers, because it's as much a design problem as it is a development problem.
Yeah. So Guthrie, is it okay if I get all nerdy here?
Go for
UX nerdy. Well, because I'm curious about two things about the UX research side of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll give you both questions, and then you can decide what order you want to tackle them in. So,
Sure.
Or if you even want to tackle them. One is, in non-conversational UX research, and maybe some of the more traditional kind of UX research, like screen design or page design or mobile design, or whatever. UX research in some organizations has a really prominent role and a long history. In other organizations, it doesn't. We see this every day, and in some organizations, of course we're going to do, user research and UX research, and in other organizations, they'll, you ask them if they do much UX research, and they say things like, well, we always have a few members of our design team go through it before we send it out. It's just, there's so much variability. So I'm wondering whether in this space, in the conversational AI space, what the view of UX research is, like whether it's, oh my gosh, yes, we've got to do UX research, or whether it's kind of, there's a lot of variability like there is in the non-conversational space. That's question number one. Don't answer yet. Mm-hmm. All right. Question number two is, are the research activities, the research methods that one would use, if I'm a UX researcher that's used to doing UX research on websites and apps, how hard will it be for me to transition into doing UX research on conversational AIs? Are there some, is it very similar, or are there some methodology differences I need to know about?
Yeah, both are great questions, and let me answer them with the question number one first. So to answer that, I've been really fortunate to be working with designers and even product managers who are really curious to learn more about how users feel about design. So most of the how we actually test them is we actually have envisioned prototypes that simulate the experience. And to kind of stick with question number one still, so yes, like I've been really fortunate enough to be part of an organization that doesn't just ship like a release immediately, at least, especially with chatbots, and every time they actually have like a prototype, there's always a lot of the designers I work with are really curious to test it out and figure out the findings. And so what I do is I actually, So question 1 and 2 are kind of blended together. So I can just go ahead and blend them together.
Yeah.
So the way it works with the research process with chatbots. So I do a lot of I've been doing a mixture. I've been primarily doing a lot of unmoderated usability testing using usertesting.com, as well as doing some remote moderated sessions. And so one of the things to really keep in mind when it comes to a chatbot experience is that unlike a testing out a web experience or a more or a mobile app experience, the experience chatbots tend to have a very linear feel compared to the to a website or a mobile app, where a lot of the time for the latter two, you're spending a lot of time testing out how they are navigating kind of at a global level. So it's definitely has more of a free-flowing flow. But with chatbots, because of the linear nature and the turn-based nature of it, really what you're trying to test for is you're trying to test for how people interpret information on the screen. And you're also trying to interpret how much information is too much information on the screen. And then you're also trying to you're also thinking about things like how they feel about what they're reading, like the personalities, and then also how the options are laid out, and whether at a micro level how they're able to navigate through the options, and also how and of course there's also how they would actually what they would expect to get out of the chatbot, and what kind of responses they expect to get out of the chatbot, and then what they would type in. So with all of these in mind, the tricky part about testing, doing usability testing with chatbots is that you have to you want to make sure that you're getting you're getting authentic responses, and without having to lead them, because with the linear experience it can be really easy to fall into the trap of leading them. So you really have to carefully create those questions such that you're setting a clear goal of what the user needs to accomplish in the task, but you're not giving away too much information. So, but how much information is too much information is kind of a tricky thing, especially with how linear it is. So, a way that I've been working around this is one, making sure to have questions about what they see on screen, just kind of an overview of having them describe what they see on screen, typical of what you find with other usability studies too. But it's really, really important, especially with chatbots, because you want to be able to get that first authentic response of what they're seeing on screen, how they interpret the information. And then the other thing is making sure that for the tasks that that the tasks are more micro level, and making sure that like for instance, let's and really setting up a scenario, so that setting up a scenario of for the user to kind of just prime them, and then kind of think in terms of the task itself is something that's really key. That's also really key, and being able to set out the requirements, and then being able to set out the requirements. Like for instance, let's say, I'll give you an example. Like let's say that the user needs to request certain things. It has to make an order for a new computer. So you want to make sure that, so this is the overarching task, ordering a new computer. But if you just leave it at that, and they're going through the chatbot and they're presented with so many different options and everything, they can really get lost. So, and like for instance, if they have the options of selecting if the overarching task is ordering a computer, but they're presented with things like, which version of Microsoft Office do you need, or or the dates or stuff like that, and the users will feel like kind of lost and feel like, am I doing the task right? But so it's really important to be key about things that making sure that you set the requirements down, like the date that they have to select, the version that they have to select, and also and other sort of requirements, but not telling them where to find them. You want to be able to make sure that given the requirements, they're able to navigate through them, and making sure that nothing is given away. So one way of kind of addressing that is making sure that the requirements are not at the very top or very bottom of the menu. That's one way of doing it. And also other things too, like making sure that you want to make sure that that's one big way of doing it. And there's also the matter of making sure that whatever menu item that you're showing is that you also have like different hotspots, especially within Vision, that kind of doesn't really shows like a different way of doing things. So it's definitely something that we're still trying to solidify, but it's something that really works well.
Yeah. Well, and I would think one thing that would be tricky too is that sometimes if you're, when you're in real life, when you're interacting with a conversational AI or with a chatbot, I mean, you don't really want it to take 15 to 20 minutes. So, but a user test, usually you'd like to collect more than 3 minutes of data. So that's, so that challenge between making sure you've got enough that it's worthwhile doing the test, but also making sure it doesn't become unrealistic, right?
Right.
Got to be a trade-off there. I would think too that have you found it, if you're using user testing or something, an unmoderated testing, where people, you're not there with them, right? They're just following the instructions and the tasks and doing the think aloud technique. Is it hard? Do they tend to talk less because they're in conversation with this chatbot? I mean, normally in a unmoderated test like that, they're very comfortable with thinking out loud and keeping up that constant patter about, oh, okay, now I'm going to look for this. Oh, wait a minute, that's not what I expected, because nothing is, usually there's not a lot of conversation going on. I mean, maybe they're filling out a form, but, a lot of times they're just, they are taking most of the action. And in this case, there's a conversation going on. I would think that tends to make the user quieter.
Yeah, well, that's actually a great question. What I will say, so there haven't actually been too many, actually very, very few cases, like very small, like only I can think of like 3 users out of, man, I've done so many usability tests on chatbots through usertesting.com, but it's like there have only been like 3 that have actually been completely silent, but the rest of them, they've actually, so the rest of them, they've actually been really good about talking aloud and actually talking aloud throughout the tasks and performing them. That's not the issue. The real issue, especially in the earlier studies I've conducted, was that because of the fact that they, when they're talking aloud and they're performing the task, they get into that flow of just performing the task itself without having to stop and take a look at what they see on screen and whatnot. And that's actually been one of the bigger challenges, because even if they're performing the task, how do they actually feel about the screen? What are they actually looking at on the screen? That's something that gets missed a lot when it comes to most unmoderated usability studies. And so one workaround, and the thing with usertesting.com is that sometimes when a lot of users, they because of the fact that the instruction window panel is, it's a very small panel that's off to the side, and there's this habit of getting into that flow of just performing the task itself, and even with the extra questions. And so one way that I've actually addressed it, and this is where I work closely with the designers on, was to actually have pop-up menus in that within the prototypes themselves as transitions to let the users, before they actually start a task, they actually have to take a look at the upcoming screen and actually describe. And that actually has worked. That's actually worked really well. And they've actually took the time to actually describe what they see on screen. And it made a big difference to the experience.
That's interesting. So since some people listening may or may not be used to doing unmoderated testing with usertesting.com, with a tool like that, typically what happens is you have different tasks that you're going to have them do that you've set up ahead of time with the tool. And those tasks appear, in a small window, and then they read, so they'll read, okay, here's your next task, do such and such, such and such. And then, they tend to concentrate then not on the task instructions. Now they're concentrating on the rest of the screen of the prototype or the product they're testing. And what you're saying is you actually build in to your prototype. It's almost like a mental reset for them. You bring up a screen even before the next task starts that says whatever it is you want to say about the task, and that actually then will make them concentrate on that rather than get so lost in the flow of what they're doing that they forget what exactly they're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And the key thing is that we had to make sure that whatever was written on whatever I've written on the for the panel when creating the questions matches well with the pop-up pop-up window. So making sure that there was consistency between the two and kind of having that redundancy was really key to really having them stay focused, stay within the confines of a particular task, like a describe what you see on screen task before moving on to the next task. And then that actually made a big difference when it came to getting more responses, other than just getting seeing whether they've been able to perform the task and just getting responses afterwards. And I think this is super, super important with chatbots, because there's a lot of invisible design, like really, really micro level design differences especially when it comes to conducting an A/B test style, or if you're trying to compare different versions. And one of the biggest hurdles really, really early on with testing via unmoderated is that because of the fact that they get so deep into the flow, and they're not able to really describe what they preferred, or the different, or even whatever differences they've noticed. So it's really important to have those types of questions along with whether they're able to along with the task instructions so that you can really understand their true sentiments, and also to be able to see how well it matches with what they're actually doing on screen, and find discrepancies.
Yeah, and I would think when you're going, one of the things that I don't work a lot on conversation interfaces these days, or voice interfaces these days. I actually worked on them a long time ago. But one of the things that I think is that people may not realize is that you can't rely on a visual memory. So if you're doing a voice conversation and you don't have any screen at all, that's even more true. So if I'm in conversation with anything, whether it's, Alexa, or whether it's the phone, the tree on the phone menu, I and they give me, press 1 for this, 2 for this, 3 for this, 4 for this, 5 for this, 6 for this, 7. It's like I don't remember what I pressed before. I don't remember what number 2 was. I mean, your auditory memory is totally different than your visual memory. And if you have if I'm doing some kind of desktop or mobile app, I may not even have to rely on memory. It's still sitting right there in front of me. I can click and see the menu again. And even though the conversational chatbot that we're talking about now, there might be a visual component, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, I can see the conversation. It's still, because it's in conversational mode, memory is different. And it's, the entire conversation isn't right in front of me. Even if I can scroll up, it's still not the same as having a whole screen in front of me. And I think that it's easy, in my opinion, from the research I did ages ago, it's easy to forget where you are, what you did, what you said before, what the other side, what the device said before. It's when it scrolls off of you, it's out of mind. And that really does change, what people do next. It's just a different experience. And I think if you haven't designed that kind of experience, you may not realize the difference in that.
Yeah, that's a really important point. And actually, it's interesting that you pointed out like the memory part of it, because I actually remember doing a study, multiple studies on the concept of a multi-bot, basically having different chatbots that you can access through one conversation. Like one chatbot could be focusing on HR, one chatbot for IT, for instance.
You mean I would be doing more than one chatbot at a time?
Yeah, within the same screen. This is something that we were exploring and experimenting with.
What did you find with that?
Well, actually, so one of the things was that with the first study that we that was done, what was found was that we were comparing just a one chatbot that it has everything versus having a versus just having two different representations of chatbots that focus on different things, and on one screen. And what was found was that users tended to prefer, they didn't really care too much about which chatbot they were talking to. They just wanted to have their queries resolved, and they would rather have just one chatbot that does everything. But the thing was that with the backend technology that we had, it was really hard to kind of because you have to feed in so much data and so much training data, and also being able to get all the different reserves. It wasn't really entirely possible to have just one chatbot do everything, which is why they were, in spite of that first finding, that they were still going towards a multi-bot approach again. But technology may change in the future. So, but until then, we had to figure out a way to have a front end workaround so that it can be accommodating. And so, to further that, we were trying to explore if we're going to have a multi-bot, if we're going to have multi-bots, how do we make it such that users don't feel lost in the conversation? And so, with a further study testing it out, one area that we explored was making sure that there are really distinct chatbot mascot icons. That's one part of it, but the bigger part of it was that there was more transparency in the transitioning between the different chatbots, as well as kind of whiting out the previous conversation, kind of fading the previous conversation, and we were testing that out. And what was found was that difference that actually made a big difference in the experience, where users actually the more distinctions between between how the bots are displayed in terms of the icons, as well, and additionally with the help of having the previous conversation with the other chatbot being faded out with the new one, it made a big difference when it came to focus. Like, users could remember exactly which chatbot they were talking to.
Well, it kind of reminds me of, I mean, isn't it like having a conversation with more than one person at a time? So,
Yeah.
If I have, 2 or 3 people I'm in conversation with, and we're talking about different things, right? And they're not talking to each other, right? I'm having a conversation over here. I mean, right now, for instance, we're having a conversation with the 3 of us.
Right.
So Guthrie can chime in, but he's hearing everything we're saying. And so it's a 3-way conversation. But if I'm having a conversation with Guthrie, but then I pause that and then I have a conversation with you, Cheenu, on something else, and you two can't hear each other, and I'm going back and forth, that could be a little strange. If I have 2 people in front of me, and sometimes I'm talking to this person over here and sometimes I'm talking to another one, but they're not talking to each other and it's on different topics, right? That is a little odd.
So, okay,
Yeah.
can I just
Sure.
make sure I got this then? So one thing to tell, when we think about chat assistants and we think about, AI, and, you're going to have a friend who's a software component. It's usually just one entity. And so is the thought, actually, why don't we have like a room of helpers? So you're in like the customer support, virtual, it's not a, call because it's text, but, so if you have a sales question, you can be like, hey, I have a sales question. And then SalesBot is like, yeah, here, what can I help you with? It's like, well, I was thinking about upgrading, but I don't know about my current plan. I'm having this problem over here. And then Technical Service Bot shows up. I'm wondering if, so like, even though, so it's not just the one persona, but maybe
one very intelligent bot that knows everything.
But you're sort of kind of in and out.
Yeah, that's actually the idea behind it. Like, exactly as you said, where you'd have like different bots with different specialties to solve different parts of the problems.
So
and
which do people prefer? Do they want one very, very, very omnipotent, intelligent bot, or would they rather have specialized bots?
So ideally, a user. So to really answer that question, it really depends on the context and use case. I would say if I were to make a general statement, ideally users would really desire and want that one chatbot that knows everything. And by everything, it really depends on the context. Like, because one of the things that to really answer this, you have to realize that users have these expectations that this chatbot is a genie, or that knows everything, or this miracle worker that knows everything. That's kind of that expectations users have. But when they start interacting with it, and they try to interact with it, they end up being really disappointed because it doesn't really answer everything that they wanted to answer, or if it does, it ends up being very, very shallow. So this is where, and this is what a lot of chatbot designers have realized, is that if you're going to build a chatbot, it better have a specialty, and it should really have a special focus. Such like, for instance, Capital One's chatbot focuses on checking everything with your bank account, and it just focuses on that and nothing else, like weather or ordering pizza or whatnot. Same with the Domino's Pizza chatbot, focuses on mainly ordering pizza, and then, or even like my own work in my previous work with Olivia.ai, where the chatbot's purpose is to provide advice on how to save money in various areas. And within that domain in itself is very has a lot of information. So it's really important to make sure that the chatbot's purpose is really well defined, and so that, one, it gives a good strategy when it comes to building the experience, and two, it makes it a lot easier for the developers to be able to really build the algorithms to really focus on the depth of that experience and being able to get that quality.
This. Go ahead, finish, and then.
But one thing to really keep in. So ideally, what ultimately people really want is that they want a go-to chatbot for that knows everything for a specific situation.
Yeah.
And within the enterprise space, it's really tricky because there's a lot of it's unlike consumer-facing chatbots. Enterprise chatbots tend to be a lot more. Their enterprise problems tend to be a lot more complex with a lot of moving parts and a lot of gates and everything. So it can be really tricky when it comes to accessing information. But for consumer-facing chatbots, that's a different story.
Might be a little easier. This reminds me of. This trade-off between being very specific, having a universal solution versus having a specific solution, it's a trade-off we've been dealing with technology. It's been a technology question for decades and decades. I mean, I'll give you two examples. A while ago, there was this, when computers first were coming out at all, computers that anyone besides specialized scientists might use, there was a lot of conversation about, do we want a universal computer, one computer that does everything, or do people want a word processing device? That's what it was called, right, for doing text work. And then do they want a calculating device for doing spreadsheet work? And there were these debates, right? Do people want a lot of separate devices, or should it be one universal computer? And then it tended to go towards the universal computer, right? So then you had, a computer and a big desktop, workstation or a server, and you ran all your programs there. However, look at all the devices that people have, right? They have a desktop, they have a laptop, they have a tablet, they have a phone, right?
They have a calculator on their desk.
Yeah, right. So we tend to think, oh yeah, one universal, but then people break it up anyway. Even though your phone, your mobile does a lot of stuff, and there's apps, it's still a separate device. And even going back even before computers, I don't know if you've ever seen the wonderful ad. You can find a picture of it online, of the Sears and Roebuck. That was what Sears was called, Sears and Roebuck catalog. Mm-hmm. I think this is from, wow, I don't know. I should know the date, but I mean, we're talking about pre-World War II for sure. It was a universal motor. And you would buy this universal household motor.
Oh, yes,
and you would
a good story.
buy the motor, and then you would have attachments. So you would have the blender attachment, the vacuum attachment, the the fan attachment. It was like one motor, and then you just so you didn't have a fan and a vacuum cleaner and a toaster.
For those hold on, time out.
Yes.
One, you would not use a universal motor for a toaster. So we'll just start there.
All right,
but
I'll take that out.
It is true that the motor that is in your house, that is basically almost identical. I believe it was the Nikola Tesla electric motor. It's functionally identical in fans, in blenders,
Yeah.
in electric cars. Current into motor, thing spins. It's a very simple and efficient device. So you could use it, but not for a toaster, because that would be...
Well, all right, the toaster was wrong. But I agree, the toaster was wrong. I was running out of examples.
But there, after you finish, I do want to tell you that there is a very niche market that applies this principle to tools. But go ahead, and then I'll tell you what it is.
Well, I was just going to say that, originally when the electric motor became, when someone said, my goodness, we can sell this to consumers. It had, it has multiple functions and people will want one of these. The initial idea was that it would be kind of a universal machine with attachments. And then, now we don't have that, right? We have, how many electric motors do we each have in our house, right? A lot, running all these different devices. We don't think of them as, dozens of electric motors. We think of them as, I have my fan and I have my hair dryer and then I have my vacuum and so on. And so I think we often we come back to this question a lot when we have new technologies. Do we do one universal that can take on many tasks, or do we break it up and they're their own thing? And it's a question that just cycles back around. All right, Guthrie, what are you talking about?
Check this out. So in for example, Amish and Mennonite communities, and I'm not exactly sure where the line is drawn, but they're obviously, they're on the farm. They're doing a lot of work on a lot of stuff. And so they need power tools. But as you know, can't use electricity.
Right.
What do you do? What they do is they use compressed air to run a wide variety of their devices. It's not electricity, but essentially you have the compressor that supplies the compressed air, and then with that there's a whole multitude of different heads that you can then put on to run the drill or run the saw or run the so that actually principle with the one motor running everything does exist, except it's just using compressed air instead of electricity. So it's just interesting that, in that situation where you're limited and you only have one input.
Yeah. So is there a reason, though, that someone isn't marketing multiple compressed air devices to do the different things? It's just probably not a big enough market for a bunch of different devices.
I would imagine. But if you get one of the I was going to say go online, but no, not really.
There's a catalog.
Yeah, if you look at the catalog, and I do believe I've paged through one, it's really amazing how many devices you can hook up to it.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
Yeah. So, Cheenu, this has been a lot of fun, and I think that the work that you're doing, the research that you're doing is really interesting. If people have a question for you and they want to get a hold of you, is that okay? And how should they reach you?
Absolutely. So I'm very, very active on LinkedIn. You can look me up via my real name, Srikant, Srikant. And it also has my nickname, Cheenu, Cheenu, Chari, Chari. And I'm also on Instagram at cheenu.chari. And I'm also on Twitter. My Twitter name, don't ask me why, it's at Minstrelman91. And additionally, I'm also on Medium too. So I've written a couple articles. In fact, one of my latest articles was on the scripts and schemas and how it relates to chatbots. So
great. Well, if you can send me, why don't you send all that to me and I'll put it in the blog post when we post about the episode.
Absolutely. Will do.
That's great. Thank you so much for joining us. And, we'll look forward to the Cheenu chatbot. Is there going to be a Cheenu chatbot I can talk to? No, I'll just talk to you.
There's only one me, so.
Good. All right. Take care. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.